Hey, good evening out there in Radio Land. It is another Monday at 8:30, and we are here for another episode of Open Source Recovery Radio. I am your host, Dr. Mark Bono, and I am, except for my lovely guest Kelly, I have no co-hosts in the station this evening, so I am feeling very abandoned at the moment. Although I did abandon everyone last week with my, I don't know, obviously no one knows why, but I had a puppy emergency. So I just got a new puppy, and I got a call a few minutes before the show from my son that he swallowed a battery. And luckily this turned out to be a false alarm, so I went dashing home to take my new puppy to the emergency vets, and the battery that he supposedly swallowed was still on the floor. So that was my evening, and Kelly and I were having a nice dinner before the show, talking about things, and I had to abandon her. So sorry about that, Kelly.
It's all right.
So I am going to just go ahead and get into it and introduce a longtime colleague and friend of mine, Kelly Moore, who is I think that's one of my co-hosts calling in.
The radio show on here. Hey.
Hey, is this Jackie?
What's going on, friends?
Hey. So I was just bemoaning the loss of my co-host, but you're here by calling at least. So thank you, Jackie.
Hey, guys. Yeah, I'm carless this week.
Yeah.
And Mark didn't want to come pick me up.
No, I just...
He was pretending he didn't get my text.
No, I really didn't. I would have picked you up. Where do you live close by, right?
Yeah, well, like 3 minutes.
Ah, I wish I knew. So sorry. All right. Well, I don't know if you heard me, I was just talking about last week. I had to abandon the show because I thought my new puppy swallowed her battery. Luckily, it turned out not to be the case. So, but we're here this week, and I have as our guest, I have Ms. Kelly Moore, who's a treatment consultant for American Addiction Centers, and you may have seen their advertisements on TV, and Kelly is my go-to person whenever I need to get someone quickly into treatment at a residential level of care. She's been right there, sort of Johnny on the spot, getting someone connected with the intake department there at American Addiction Centers, and going through the process of engaging them and getting their insurance looked at and all that good stuff. And the turnaround time has been pretty amazing. So welcome to the show, Kelly.
Thank you, Dr. Bono. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's you can call me Mark because you really don't call me Dr. Bono in the real world. So I've known Kelly for years, and I used to be the director of Rushford for a while, the clinical director, and Kelly and I worked together way back then, and so she has moved on to working with American Addiction Centers, and we've stayed in touch, and we've helped each other out professionally in terms of meeting our clients' needs. So, Kelly, do you want to kind of talk to our listeners about what it is you do with American Addiction Centers and why it can be so helpful for people in recovery?
Absolutely. American Addiction Centers sets itself aside from the rest, in a sense that if things should trickle down from the top level, the gentleman I work for, Michael Cartwright, clearly gets it. He's in recovery himself 20 some odd years. He is the author of the book Believable Hope, and the book is basically based on his story is how it starts. However, when he began to put this whole development together of American Addiction Centers, he used a couple of philosophies that he knew were very, very important as he lived it himself, one of which is where the position that I have comes into play as the treatment consultant, whereas he believes there should be a point of contact for everyone, because timing is of the essence in terms of needing treatment and that bubble of time when someone really is at a point where they know and are very aware that that is their next step. So therefore, there are about 74 of me across the country, and I answer my phone round the clock, literally. And certainly there's a recording that says there's an 800 number. Should I be, somewhat on the radio like I'm with you right now, Mark? So if my phone is ringing, they'll at least be able to go to someone. But I answer my phone round the clock. All 74 of us do. And we just understand that timing is of the essence at that point to get that person where they need to be and the information they need to get them there.
And I think that's one of the reasons that Kelly and I work well together is we both, even though I do outpatient treatment at my Center for Compassionate Recovery in Madison, Kelly and I both have a similar philosophy, in particular when it comes to things like having it need to be extremely responsive when people are looking for care. You have to strike when that opportunity is there. So, when I first started my practice, I was the only one answering the phones, and I called people back within the hour, no matter when they called. And now that we have someone who's actually answering the phones, after the office hours are over, the phone rolls over to my phone. And I'm there to pick it up on weekends and evenings because it's the same kind of mentality as people, when they're calling, especially because what I do is opiate addiction treatment, although I do other kinds of treatment too, but most of my clients are calling because they have opiate addiction, and they want to get on Suboxone, they want to get therapy, they can't wait, and when someone is at a point where they need residential treatment, they can't wait a week or 2 or 4, which is unfortunately how it works with the.
Sadly, it's a matter of life and death, especially with opiate addiction.
Yeah, absolutely, and alcohol as well. But yes, opiate addiction too. I mean, an individual can certainly die, unfortunately, from an alcohol withdrawal, and so certainly we know in the country that we are all living this epidemic, and it's just paramount that we are on call, if you will, to at least make the difference, make the change, and get people healthier.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many clients who have called. I'm sure you hear this all the time, Kelly, but people call and the response that they get is they're really taken aback by how quickly we get back to them, and not just the way we, not just the timing, but the nature of the way we speak with them and so forth. And I know that you embrace the same thing. And
absolutely.
Yeah, and clients are always impressed by that because that's not the norm, and because they know they needed it at the moment. Yeah. So I know now, as most people know, there's not a lot of private residential programs in Connecticut. So American Addiction Centers does not have a program local here, but you do have yet. Well,
I like to say yet.
Yeah, that would be great. There's Kelly. Do you know the name? We were speaking about this on the air a few weeks ago. There's in Connecticut, you have to demonstrate the need, right, for a program. Do you know what I'm speaking of? There's I forgot. I haven't been able to. I've been thinking. It's been stuck in my head, and I can't remember the name of the. There's a governmental organization that you have to do you have to go through this process to get a needs assessment of some sort to demonstrate the need for and which is crazy that I don't know the relationship between that process and why we have so few private residential beds, but I shudder to think that maybe there is a relationship there,
Well, I think sometimes, Connecticut is very, very kind to its Husky Medicaid folks. And I do believe that when someone is in need and say going to an emergency room, is probably what we might be talking about in that sense. Someone would most times have to present medically as being in an active withdrawal.
I was talking. Yeah, no, I was talking more about like if your company wanted to come in and start a program in Connecticut, they have to go through something at the state level where.
Oh, absolutely.
They have to demonstrate the need for
Correct.
Or that kind of program.
Correct.
And somehow that everyone agrees the need is overwhelming, but somehow there aren't a lot of private companies who are able to open up residential programs in Connecticut, and I'm afraid to think that maybe that there's a relationship there, that we have some.
That's probably way above my pay grade.
Yeah.
I'm on the ground.
Yeah, I get it.
At the front lines.
I get it.
And all I know is through my experience, if it's not happening in my Buick, because I drive Connecticut every single day, representing American Addiction Centers for the state of Connecticut, then I don't know what's going on. But all I do know, thank goodness, is that I am able to help folks from the state of Connecticut every single day admit to our treatment centers. And we have a process. Not only do I answer the phone regularly, but our process is outstanding as well. Whereas the process goes that if you let's talk about our experience together.
Sure.
If you were to call me, as we have in the past, and told me you had a client who was needing possibly a detox and residential treatment, as we know from back in the day as being the actual continuum of care, right? For a more successful recovery begins with a detox, and possibly in your field and where you are, you would know whether residential would be necessary from where you're treating. And I would collect that information from you, Mark, or from your client,
right,
which are just the demographics and the insurance information he may have, a commercial insurance policy, which is what our niche is. You know, the Anthem, Aetna's, Cigna, Connecticut, United Healthcare. And within a 90-minute window, you will hear, or your client will hear, exactly what that insurance policy will be able to do to help him or her. And someone is also on the phone right then and there to conduct an interview, an assessment, to make sure we're the right fit for that person. I mean, we are dual diagnosis. We treat all kinds of addictions, but, you know, having 14 facilities primarily made up of detox and residential treatment, there is hardly ever a wait list, and we appeal to many insurance policies. But, you know, it's everybody's different, right? I mean, it's the right fit or not the right fit, but within that 90-minute window, you and I know, and folks out there who are struggling know that by the time you or I get the call, it didn't start just yesterday. So possibly when I'm that first point of contact, I can get them that necessary information that they can certainly refuse when they hear what the information is. But I always encourage folks, please get the information that they need to be able to say yes or no to.
Yeah, and that 90-minute window that's an incredible turnaround time. And that is a manifestation of the philosophy that your company has around the importance of being that responsive.
I agree.
Yeah,
it's really what separates us from a lot. You know, I talk about when my family had struggled. You know, when my daughter had struggled 13 years ago, there were not that many options. 13 years ago, when you think about it, wasn't even that long ago.
Right.
13 years ago. But today there are many, many, many options, be it out of state or, possibly in state, even with a state sort of facility. But
one of the major differences between I think there are a lot of differences. One certainly major difference is if you're trying to get help with a state. A state facility or in-state, some of the state facilities will take private insurance. Mm-hmm. But trying to get into one of those facilities, typically what my clients who have Medicaid have to do is they have to call every day until there's a bed, and that could be weeks.
I know.
That could be weeks and weeks, and more sometimes. So that's a completely different experience than what you're describing.
I agree. You're absolutely right. And the part where I come in, if you will, is, one thing, again, through Michael Cartwright, we need to help people no matter what sort of insurance they have. So for the fact that I drive Connecticut every single day, I've got a network of folks in Connecticut where, sometimes we might have I have folks that will say, let's see what we can do. And I can at least give them direct contact to at least start their own process, get their assessments going, and get them closer faster.
Yeah. So because you do have a lot of facilities, also there are a lot of types of facilities that could potentially be a good match for different people. I recall one facility that I believe when we sent one of my clients went there with your help, and I think you had just purchased a facility. I'm trying to remember. It has therapeutic like horseback riding.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
We do, within our treatment, being dual diagnosis, we also use many therapies. And, trying to...
Equine therapy. I was
absolutely,
trying to...
yes, we do have that. And one thing I learned through that process, and frankly, it was when you and I worked together, and I had no idea that was not riding a horse. It's actually just really getting to know the horse.
Right.
And that was a little different for me because they're big. So I commend anybody who can do that. But yes, we have that, and we also, I don't want to use the acronyms. There's so many acronyms, so little time. But, holistically, acupuncture we offer. And certainly massage, as some would think, might be the spa type. But it's actually, massage and hot tubs are actually, and you are probably well aware of this, aid someone's difficult in their detox period at that point, maybe. So we do offer a wide range.
Right. And I brought that one up as just an example because I think there are certain people out there that, we have to, you know the expression, make it a program of attraction, right? So when people are making a decision to go into residential treatment, it's a big decision.
Absolutely.
Right? And, there are factors that will help push that person over the, over the line to say, yes, I'll make that decision. And for some people, something like equine therapy is so attractive that, their thought process is, well, that sounds pretty good, actually. That doesn't sound bad, and maybe I'll actually enjoy, treatment as opposed to thinking about this as this like punitive kind of process that you have to go through.
Right. Yeah. And when I get that call, that was such a great point to make, the whole punitive idea about it. I mean, you and I are on a radio show right now. I mean, we are all as a society, I think, beginning to talk about it out loud, hoping that we can remove some of that stigma that still hangs over our head, because you are absolutely right. When I'm speaking with folks, and I talk to family members, and they are, still stuck in the stigma, as I was 13 years ago as well. And since then, when I'm contacted, I try to, celebrate the fact that the call was made.
Right.
I mean, this is the day it changes, right? I mean, I usually ask, where were you 2 weeks ago? And as scary as this might be, it's because we all got used to using. And when I say all of us, I mean the user, certainly in the trickle effect, because if anyone thinks it's not affecting loved ones, then everyone's fooling themselves. And the day that call comes through, it is really me talking someone into saying, good for you, man.
Right.
Let's do this. Why one more day?
Right.
Why?
And I've literally heard Kelly talking, that's what I was saying before. It's not just how quickly she responds, but it's the nature and the way she embraces that call with the client to really alleviate that stigma and that fear. And, we strive to do the same thing at my practice. And, I've had many clients who were crying on the phone and just in distress and not sure about the process. And they need some hand-holding. They need someone who's going to treat them with a little with respect and dignity, and just someone to help them to understand that this is a really tough moment for them, and it's a delicate moment,
Delicate moment, but one thing everyone who might be listening should know is that one who finally reaches up from the ground, essentially, never wakes up any morning saying, yeah, let me ruin my life today. Put that on the schedule. That's what I want to do. And if we can understand it, and when we can understand and embrace that and encourage to be open to the change, wow, who knows? Who knows what can happen? You don't know until you get out of the fog.
Yeah, and it is a fog people are in. And that's why they hesitate for so long, because they have to have a moment of clarity.
Yep.
And it takes an odd sort of combination of factors sometimes for that moment of clarity to come to be. And that's why you have to, really be there to help them at that time, because that window can pass.
Absolutely. And in regards to the window passing, one thing I'm going to add about American Addiction Centers is we are excellent follow-uppers.
Oh, yeah.
If you will.
I can attest to that.
We will continue to reach out, continue to try to get that person back on the phone, if you will, to encourage them to keep moving in the direction that they were. But we follow up not only after they're in treatment, but we follow up to get them there. Mm-hmm. Again, through Michael Cartwright's guidance in terms of knowing that timing is of the issue.
Yeah, and I know you stayed in touch with family members who have called on behalf of someone who's been affected by the opiate addiction, and you've the person may or may not be ready right at the moment, but you're on the phone with them and ongoing.
Yep.
And so, Kelly, obviously I don't want to put you on the spot, but in terms of your internal motivation for this kind of work. I mean, obviously you mentioned you're having your own sort of experience in your family.
Sure.
But how does that help you? Because obviously this is something that you can't be. You really have to have a sort of inherent passion to do, in some way, shape, or form. And oftentimes that can come from our own struggles or our own struggles with our family members. But how does that help you with this level of intensity of work, this kind of work which is so intense? How does your own history kind of come into play with that?
Well, when I get the call, and it's probably why I do answer, at one morning, 3:30 in the morning, I happened to roll over and I heard my phone ring, and I got up and answered it, and the person on the other line thought I was a recording, a voicemail, and I said, well, hey, I call it an omen, man. Let's do this. But I do that because my family did live that. And I try to explain to folks when I do end up playing, showing that card, if you will, that that I had all the same fears. So I know it's at the other end of the phone when it's ringing, when my phone is ringing. And I had the same fears, and I had the same, what do I do for my loved one? And what I do try to explain to them is as fearful as it was for my entire family. Not only my daughter who was struggling, but, all of us not really kind of knowing what was going on, and I call it the gray area, not knowing actually when substance took over my family, which is really what it came down to. But had it not been for that experience, My family as a whole family unit was going nowhere really quickly. And for not the experience we lived with my daughter going through treatment and my entire family also involving our own counseling, if you will, Al-Anon at the time, had we not gone through that, we would not be as close as we are today as a family unit, as open to talk about the struggles as we are today. It actually, people think I'm a little weird when I say it, but, appreciate the addiction we lived through, because we wouldn't be on this side of the treatment without it.
Oh, no, absolutely. Sometimes we have had guests on where, tragedy struck, and it's hard to feel grateful. But I've had other guests on. I've had a lot of people who I've met, obviously, who have come through the affliction of addiction. And, as a family, if you come through that, there's almost no way to come out the other end of that without being closer, more open, more empathetic towards each other, and more supportive. Because if you're not, then I don't think recovery works. There's
Agreed.
a lot of research that shows that a person's support system is a big predictor of treatment outcomes. And a few weeks ago we had a woman named Donna on, who started an organization called CARES.
Well, I've always said I would never be able to without support. I don't know how people do it without it. I just don't know.
I don't think it can happen without support. I don't think there's anything alone about this disease.
No, that's something we've been. I mentioned a couple of times on the air this the TED Talk about addiction that you may have seen, and it was a great kind of a condensed discussion about how addiction is really a disease of separation, and that recovery is really a process of togetherness. And if you have to try to pull it, describe it succinctly, that's a great way to do it. But we had this woman Donna on, and who had not one but two of her sons that were affected by opiate addiction, and Donna and her son Matt were on the show, and she started this organization here in Connecticut called CARES, and this is a great organization that does support groups for people who have a family member affected by opiate addiction. And what she said was that they noticed that people who came to the groups, the family members who came and worked hard and took something away from those groups, that there was sort of this strange phenomena where those family members, the persons who were struggling with addiction, they had better outcomes than you would suspect. And, that really didn't surprise me, but it sort of was I think it caught them by surprise that how is it that our getting support is transferring over to the persons in our lives who are struggling with addiction, that as a group we're having better results. And it didn't surprise me at all, actually. And you could see the relationship between her son and her. You could just sense that what they've been through has caused them to become much closer and open, and all the stigma and shame associated with addiction, it had really been sort of obliviated by the process they've been in, and of course by the fact that they now do this support process for people.
Absolutely, and I think when folks do it together, it almost makes a stronger link. And just as the addiction, might have been the one component that spun the family, as you call it, separation, right? It spun the family in one direction. It does take, I think, the family involvement to spin it when it's going back.
Yeah, and I think a family needs some support by the social support and professional support.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like you got your family got that.
We did.
Yeah.
We did.
And whenever I get a new client at my practice, what's one of the first questions I ask them? It's about their support system and what do they know about addiction, and if it's opiates, what do they know about opiate addiction? What do they know about the treatment for opiate addiction? Do they want their family member to come in so I can provide them education? How will their family handle it if they have a setback? And do they want me to talk to them about that? And so that's a big focus of mine. And I have lots of people who come in for a session, come in for sessions with their boyfriend, their girlfriend, their husband, their wife, their son, their daughter, that kind of thing. And I really feel that can be a big impact on the treatment outcome.
Absolutely. Again, it's that talking about it out loud. We're finally all as a society really beginning to talk about it out loud. It's a start. Still have a lot of work to do, of course.
Yeah. We one of the running themes on our show has been, reducing stigma, and thanks to Jackie, who's listening in and who's ready to contribute. If I ever shut up for a second, we had a guest on who now I've been invited to be a co-host too. This lovely young lady, Is Marie, who came on and has with having had a recent tragedy in her life, lost her husband to an opiate overdose, and it had only been 6 weeks or something like that, and she came on to tell her husband's John's story because because John had always said if anything happened to him, she wanted her to tell his story, but because she wanted to contribute to reducing the stigma and the strength that it took to do that is still something that I admire greatly, and
her strength is incredible.
Yeah, anyone and that was our second show, and it was really emotional. But she said she wanted to come on and do it, and I just thought it took a lot, but we're things like that really go a long way to combating the stigma of addiction. With how much news coverage there is on the opiate epidemic in particular because of the number of deaths. I mean, we can't anymore afford to hide behind stigma and have people not get the help they need because of stigma when every day it's more and more of a life-threatening illness to a point that it's becoming the number one cause of death in young people, superseding any other cause of death like cancer or car accidents, things like that. It's the numbers are staggering.
Yeah, absolutely. And I came to this afternoon from a forum that was held in Meriden from the CAP organization, Addiction Professionals organization, and they were talking about that, and one of the speakers there was a doctor who actually took the fall, if you will, for years and years of having to, how much do you hurt, the happy face, the sad face,
right.
And how it ended up going in that direction. But unfortunately, you're right. There are many, many young people, too many young people who are going down that road. And if you don't mind me slipping in at this point, sometimes there is a difficult placement for the young adult, if you will, which seems to be the age, right? We're aware of 18 to 26 years old. And one of American Addiction Center 14 facilities is a facility in Mississippi that we do treat 18 and older.
Right.
However, this particular facility has a very strong 18 to 26-year-old program,
right,
and which also has the equine therapy and hiking and camping and very outdoor, kayak, that sort of thing, to keep that young person engaged and busy, and other options to.
Right. And that's great that you have those variety of programs that you can sort of match people based on their needs, their preferences, their age groups,
Their age, yeah.
Yeah. Which is great. And I've worked with that population of 18 to 25-year-olds, and it's definitely a bit different. They're different, and it helps to have them sort of it's harder to treat them in a more heterogeneous group where the age difference is spread out. It really is, and they do better. They do better when they're sort of grouped together.
Sure, like-minded folks. Absolutely, it makes sense.
Yeah. What other kind of specialties does American Addiction Centers have in terms of programs?
Well, what we are doing, as a matter of fact, we have started a first responder program. One of our presidents is a retired fireman in recovery as well, so it was because of his experiences that we offer that in a couple of our facilities where a first responder can take advantage. And you find that when you're talking to the first responder, be it police department, fire department, corrections department, anything of the like, again, like-minded, they only know what happens in their world, and when you work full-time, let's say, for example, as a corrections officer, you're working full-time in a pretty intense intense environment, police department. I don't know how police and fire, my father passed away, as a matter of fact, 37 years in recovery himself. And I mean, that's just very intense, and they all belong to their own club, if you will. You know what I mean? So we offer that as a component to treatment so that when they do come and join us, everyone has taken the training to be aware and sensitive of first responders.
Interesting.
And we have a couple of facilities that can do that for folks. And in that regard, not being in the state of Connecticut, sometimes that person may not want to be sitting in treatment with someone they might have crossed paths with locally. Mm-hmm. So, the distance just might not be an issue, and most times isn't.
Right.
To get.
And I had the experience of working for a few years inside a federal penitentiary. So even though I didn't work as a correctional officer, although I did very part-time, because even a psychologist, when you're in the prison system, you have to work, you have to take a certain number of shifts as a correctional officer. So I had some interesting days where...
I bet you did.
Oh, yeah. Me and 150 inmates in a housing unit with a radio, a flashlight, and a set of handcuffs. I used to hide the handcuffs in the drawer, underneath the drawer of the desk, because, where were those handcuffs going to wind up?
Well, sure.
It wasn't going to be on an inmate that I tackled and put in a pair of handcuffs on by myself, so that wasn't happening. But I had that experience working in that environment. Jackie's laughing at me. I had that experience working in that environment, and it is its own... there is a certain kind of challenges that come up. And one of the reasons I left that environment was after a couple of years, I realized that, I didn't know how it would affect me long term if I tried to make a career out of being a prison psychologist and work in that environment for 20 years. I think it would have had an effect on my psyche that I really didn't want to.
I don't know how it doesn't.
Yeah.
But to add to that, we also, to all of our facilities across the country, are also combined to the full continuum of care. So it's not just medical detox and residential treatment, but let's say our facilities, for example, in Florida and anywhere, the one we were just talking about in Mississippi, Oxford Center, they are all attached to the continuum, being the outpatient, IOP or down to outpatient. And certainly we know if medical detox is so very important, the continued care is by far as vital, which is where you come in.
Right.
So when, folks, from my purposes here from the state of Connecticut, are coming home, I'm referring more here locally to outpatient because they begin talking about that at admission.
Right.
How important continued care is.
Yeah, because we've been talking about residential a little bit lately on the program, and I've been talking about the continuum of care, because without that, continuum, either detox or residential, it has extremely limited value in terms of long-term outcomes. It
Right.
has to be part of a continuum, because it's just research supports that. It doesn't matter. You could do a great job in residential treatment.
Correct.
If that residential treatment is a standalone kind of thing, people come home, and without a good transition process, planned process that should start early on, it often doesn't go that well.
Right,
So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, and we know through experience that there's certainly no quick fix. So it's not,
No.
And
in particular with opiate addiction, it is not a quick fix. I was listening to a news report today. They were talking about, I don't know if you heard about all this controversy in the news in the last day or two about this bill that was put through by the gentleman from Pennsylvania who's now was Donald Trump's nominee to be the new drug czar, right? So there was this bill that was put through, and it had a couple of changes in the language, and there were some significant limitations to what the DEA could do in terms of limiting influxes of opiates to certain areas. So previously there had been the DEA had some latitude where, let's say, a small town of 1,000 people they were getting imports of opiates that were way in excess of that the population could possibly use. Well, the DEA could investigate that. And so this new bill came through that just had a couple of tweaks in the language, and now the DEA was extremely limited in their ability to do that. And so, Trump talked about, the fact that he was going to make this big announcement about the opiate epidemic. And so the news report talked about the previous attempts at replacing and repealing Obamacare. Those previous attempts had significant clauses for putting money into the opiate epidemic effort to treat, so $45 billion and this kind of thing. And while that's great that there would be this big insurgence of money, at the same time we'd be taking away people off of Medicaid and then preventing them from having access to treatment that way, because that's my practice is heavily based on helping people who have state insurance.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So there's a lot of controversy at this particular moment in time about what are we doing governmentally to actually address the opiate epidemic. But there's really a strong need to have a continuum, and that has to include people regardless of what kind of insurance they have. Excuse me. And the continuum can go in both directions, right? So someone starts in outpatient care with me, and then they're not making it, and so then I refer them to a higher level of care up to programs like that your company offers, and clients could then go back down the treatment ladder, so to speak, to as they come out of residential treatment to outpatient programs like mine.
Absolutely. And if you recall, you and I talked probably well over a year ago when Suboxone was becoming,
right,
available. And And we, certainly profess ourselves as being 12-step focused,
Right.
non-narcotic, abstinence-based. However, so many changes, right, have occurred as of late that, again, if 13 years ago isn't that long ago, in the last...
Oh, it's been a lot of changes in 13 years.
Absolutely, in the last couple of years, whereas American Addiction Centers also now is involved in genetic testing, whereas we're able to use genetic testings to help guide psychiatric medication treatments.
Right.
And so we also have addiction labs. That's the name of the lab services that we have as well, too, which does extensive testing and research on, like, the fentanyl that's, being found over and over and over again. So when people do come to us for treatment, we may today come upon that individual who is on a prescribed Suboxone medication.
Right.
So as much as we certainly are 12-step focused and abstinence-based, if we, it's different for everyone, right? Everybody is unique in their own. And certainly with an exchange of medical records, possibly a doc-to-doc conversation, and an approval to one of our facilities on top of my head right here, Laguna Beach in California, certainly supports that, as long as it's taken, by prescription, and it is certainly in terms of this is how this individual needs to perform,
Yeah. And, you, as you're well aware, on an outpatient basis, I'm a very strong proponent of medication assisted treatment.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that I focus on is the fact that the medication is the assisting is assisting the treatment. It's not the treatment.
I love that.
Yeah, but that's what it's called, medication assisted treatment.
Right.
And as you know, in my practice, we we bear that out in terms of the model that we use. But I also am a strong believer that if someone is physically addicted to opiates, they can't just stop using by themselves. I don't care how great a sponsor they have or how great a therapist they have. The physical aspect of opiate dependency is usually too overwhelming for anyone to just simply stop, in particular on an outpatient basis. And so in the past, not just, most residential facilities, up until not that long ago, if you were on Suboxone, they would take you off, and that didn't always work out in the long run. And so now a lot of programs, yours included, have started to have a more flexible, individualized approach to treating persons with opiate dependency. If they professed a desire or were already on Suboxone, and in particular if they had an ability to continue that medication after treatment. And I really applaud that. I really think that we have to really look at what works. And there's no doubt that opiate replacement treatment in terms of medication, if done properly, and that's a key thing, if done properly, can be extremely important and sometimes necessary part of someone's recovery. And I don't feel me personally, I don't think it's in any way mutually exclusive of 12-step based programs. Now, there is a lot of stigma against the use of Suboxone or methadone in the 12-step world, but personally, again, I think that comes from a lack of education, a combination of things. One's a lack of education. Two is, unfortunately, a lot of poor prescribing practices, and it's been that way forever, where the peer support programs don't trust the medical field because they don't always get it right. And then the other thing, I think, with something like Suboxone, it's a little tricky because there are people who can and do abuse Suboxone in certain ways. People who are using Suboxone on the street will often use it to keep their addiction alive by avoiding withdrawal in between times when they can have access to full agonist opiates. And so people see that, and they they don't see the real medical value of Suboxone. They just see it as something that's being abused. So it is it can be more of a subtlety thing, and once people need to really understand the subtleties of something, they often don't get it right. They have sort of a black and white opinion about things. But personally, I don't see a lot of people who just, on an outpatient basis, just go to therapy or go to AA and stop using opiates with just a social support system in place. Although that can be critical, without treating the medical aspects of opiate addiction, it can be really, really tough to pull that off for most people. And I definitely applaud the way your agency has. I know that was a tough. That's a tough give for places that see themselves as being sort of abstinent based. To understand that one opiate is not the same as another opiate is a strong subtlety. To really understand the difference between what a partial agonist does versus a full agonist, and a lot of people mix up methadone and Suboxone too. They kind of group them together.
Sure.
So that's which is really unfortunate because they're not the same. And I have strong feelings about the fact that we're still using methadone because it's not 1979 anymore, right? And we have this new thing called Suboxone. It's way better. It's way safer. And you can prescribe it, in a much more dignified setting and all that good stuff. So.
And on a case-by-case basis, of course, you just described a case where someone may be abusing it, right? But someone could actually stay on it and titrate down in the behavioral setting.
Well, all of my clients, 95% of my clients are coming off Suboxone in a gradual process. A few choose to stay on because of pain management issues,
sure,
that kind of thing. But we don't look at Suboxone as a forever deal. And right now, since we've been in practice for a few years, we have quite a good group of people who are down to just the tiniest doses of Suboxone, and we're getting ready to have a whole group of people to come off Suboxone.
I think that's great, and we have to, and correct me if I'm wrong, please. Being that is certainly for the opiate, right,
yep.
and the craving, and that certainly that person may still be struggling, say, with an alcohol issue or a cocaine issue, not necessarily. Again, not the quick fix for everything across the board.
In the beginning, we have a certain percentage of people who they've stopped using opiates with the help of Suboxone, but they're still coming up positive for cocaine or alcohol.
Right.
And we have to work on that with them. And there is no cocaine medication.
Correct.
Although there is alcohol medication that can help with alcohol, but in certain ways, different ways, like Antabuse, that
sure.
kind of thing. But we definitely, Suboxone is a miracle medication, but it's not a cure-all. And it certainly doesn't cure addiction. And,
sure.
And it doesn't cure opiate addiction. It can help chemically kind of constrain it for a period of time, but without therapy, without social support, without education, without all the other aspects, it usually will fail in the long run in terms of
sure.
of treatment outcomes. It's gotta be part of a comprehensive treatment process.
And certainly if someone is struggling with another sort of addiction, maybe where American Addiction Centers could come in, and you being that doc to doc, for example, conversation prior to an admission, and can still happen as quickly.
Right, and I think that even if someone's not and they're on Suboxone, the residential process has still got all the same challenges. A person can go into residential treatment and not use opiates because they're in a contained environment,
mm-hmm.
but they're also going to struggle with ongoing withdrawal symptoms long after a week
mm-hmm.
And so it's really nice for someone to be in treatment and not be completely preoccupied with getting high 24/7, because it takes them almost 90 days for their opiate receptors in their brain to calm down. So there's a lot of, I think, therapeutic benefit to being able to be in residential treatment and comfortable physically, and not continually preoccupied with wanting to get high, and be able to focus on the program that's offered to them.
Right.
And so I feel like that's a much better way of going about it often. I did work in a year-long program, as you know, with 18 to 25-year-olds. And what that program did not let people come in on Suboxone. And the way they figured it was like, well, they're in there for a year, so they're going to be in a contained environment for a year. They're not going to need Suboxone. And, I mean, that's one reason. And what I can tell you is I routinely got feedback from those clients that, well, I'm fine now, I don't think about it, but for the first 3 months, that's all I thought about every day. And I didn't act on it because of this, because of that. I'm nowhere near home. I don't have the resources. I wouldn't get kicked out. But they were uncomfortable. They were constantly preoccupied for 90 days or so. And it's hard. You're not able to take quite as much advantage of the treatment and the care that's offered to you when you're feeling that way.
Yep, absolutely. And if you don't mind me, I'm just going to touch on the fact that we talk about continued care and such. And, for example, here in Connecticut, we don't have a facility, of course, yet. But we do have all over the country, representative of it is an alumni program.
Yeah.
So that, the same support systems all come together, certain programs.
I've had clients who've been down in the program, and they tell me that, like, it would be almost a running joke. Like, every day someone new would come in, and it would be someone from Connecticut. It's like about 40% of the clients in the program in Florida were from Connecticut.
I help someone from Connecticut every single day.
Yeah. So that's why it's also a little, this isn't obviously a knock on your agency, because nobody's, been able to really, open up a bunch of residential programs in the state. But it does just seem so bizarre that so many people, we have just as big a opiate problem in our state as the rest of New England, and yet we have to send people all around, and it's just sort of a strange anomaly, and I have heard that. It's frustrating, Jackie says.
It is frustrating, and that would be a conversation for legislators and insurance companies.
Yeah, and there's I've talked to many legislators, and there's a big focus in Connecticut on the opiate epidemic, and I've talked at length to different state reps who are really championing this cause, and I know that there's a lot of discussion at the legislative level, but yet that hasn't been a focus. Treatment, it's weird. Treatment is like not really talked about. It's prevention, with changing the laws, the prescribing laws, with making Narcan more available.
Correct.
It's those kind of things, which are great, but like nobody seems to want to invest in treatment as a part of the solution, which doesn't make any sense. It's like we don't really believe in treatment. I can't. It's a pet peeve of mine.
And I think insurance language is designed to be confusing to the regular Joe, as I'll accuse myself of being the regular Joe. And I think it's designed to be difficult to follow and navigate, and hard for a family or an individual that's in crisis, needing help right now.
Yeah. And I would hate to think about the kind of insurance policies that could be made available to people that would be cheaper, that wouldn't cover things like addictions. And how would you know if someone in your family is going to need that? And what would you do once that I don't need to have addictions as part of my insurance, because that's not anything on the horizon with any of my family members. So I'm going to save some money and not check that box. And then what would you do? I don't understand. I don't understand that concept. That's why it's called insurance, because you don't know if you're going to need it.
True. But in our field, if there is a lineage about it, as much as I was shocked when it happened to my family, I was not unfamiliar with a father who when he passed away, would, say out loud, tell everybody I'm in recovery, because he was alive to know what I was doing for a living, and he wanted everybody to know, on top of the roof. But sometimes, with family heritage and such, we might have a clue whether we should check that box.
Yeah. Well, Kelly, you were worried we wouldn't have enough to talk about, but it is actually an hour is up.
No way!
Yeah. I had no doubt. So we've reached that time of the show where we're going to say goodbye. Jackie, thanks for calling in, and if you don't have a car next week, I'll definitely pick you up.
Thank you, Jackie.
We know thank you for coming. Bye-bye.
I couldn't hear it.
If it's tonight too.
All right. Well, all right. Let me say goodbye to everyone, and we'll be back next week. And good night to all the listeners, and thank you, Kelly, and thank you.
860-573-4408.
Yeah, we should have said that in the beginning.
Yes. If you need help, call Dr. Bono or.
Yep. All right. Well, good night, everyone, and let me just also say good night, Thea. Good night, Sullivan. Good night, Connor. Love you guys. Bye.
Gone.